Hello. So we're going to take a moment to test technology because I'm using an external microphone and I want to make sure that it's working. So let's see what happens. Let's see if I can hear us on my phone.
Oh yeah. Crossing your finger.
Okay, it's working. Delightful. Hello, everyone. I'm so happy to have Phyllis here. So, Phyllis and I have known each other since not. Were you at the my first ritual with Moonbeats Earth Song Sanctuary was Willow's Wickening in bulk of 1998.
Gosh, it's been that long, huh? I don't remember that Wickening, but I think I was in there after you guys have been going for a while.
Okay. So Phyllis and I have known each other since the late 90s. And we are now both in Portland, Oregon. And when the Edge magazine gave me some lovely gifts of a variety of different oracle cards. One of the decks that they gave me was Odin and the Nine Realms Oracle, and I was like a 54 card set by Sonia Grace, and I was like, ooh, how lovely. And I am not a heathen. I have Germanic ancestry, but I'm like, I can't really talk about this one terribly cogently myself. This is an excellent opportunity to bring in an expert and Phyllis has been a part of the heathen community since before Moonbeats.
No, after.
After.
So it's something like 15, 16 years.
And so I have brought we started talking about this deck. Oh, like I think I was given the deck like a year or two ago.
Yeah, but we didn't talk about it that long.
Yeah, no. It's not like been an ongoing thing. It's been a like, toss it out. Would you be interested and willing? And then life. And then it got back on my radar because of the talk that you were doing.
Oh, right, at Pagan Pride Day?
Yes. And I was like, ooh, would you be willing to come on my channel and talk about your talk at Pagan Pride Day? Because I think that it is important to understand inclusive heathenism, to know warning signs of like, what happens if I accidentally end up in a group that has white supremacists in it? And then to also dive in a little bit to a Loki devotional, Blood Unbound, that Phyllis wrote some of the foreword on. So there's a lot to get into in an hour. So let's dive on in. Did I where would you like to start?
Well, I guess we should start with inclusive heathenry.
I love this.
People know what that is. And inclusive heathenry is basically heathenry where you're not excluding people for their skin color or their gender affiliation or who they love or what they do or how able they are, all of that. What gender they are, I already said gender. I think about it a lot.
Look at that thing to think about.
But because heathenry has in the past had problems with what I would call white supremacy, and I guess I'd capitalize white supremacy and also lowercase it. When I say, and this is just
Oh.
my own personal vision, this is not anybody's official. When I say white supremacy with capital letters, I'm talking about hate groups who go out and burn crosses on people's lawns. When I'm talking about white supremacy with lowercase, I mean the structural racism part of our society that is based on the core values of a bunch of old white guys. So, and heathenry's had a problem with both because heathenry is generally made up of white people. A lot of people are interested because of their cultural heritage,
Mhm.
which in inclusive heathenry is not needed. Anybody can be called by any god. Who the hell am I to say that we only like Norwegians?
Mhm.
And there's been particular sects of heathenry that tend particularly more toward white supremacy and male chauvinism. And then there are other groups that have been known for being liberal and open-minded, and I'm definitely on that side. I'm so on that side. I worship a god that's not even widely embraced in heathenry, that being Loki. I'm Lokian, I admit it. Everybody knows it. They've known it for a long time, which is why I did the forward for that book.
Yeah.
And what's kind of interesting about Lokians as a group is they're more likely to be heathens of color, heathen, gay heathen, LGBTQIA. Damn. Plus.
LGBTQAI2 plus.
Oh, I
Two
got
or
them.
2S plus.
I got them, just not in the right order.
And some are also adding a P in there for people like myself who are pansexual.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, that's
So there's always room in the quilt
there's
bags.
it's true. It's part of the reason why I like the word queer
Yeah.
as my umbrella term. But again, that's not for everybody and triggers and yeah. Language, it is ever evolving.
One of the ways you can actually tell if a group is more likely to be hate oriented or at least white supremacist with a lowercase w, is how they feel about Lokians. A lot of the time, you generally don't have white supremacist, gay hating Lokians. Generally, you just don't. I yeah, there's always. I'm sure there's one out there, but
But that's an even deeper minority.
but that's actually a red flag to keep an eye
Yeah.
out for when you're evaluating a group.
Good to
How do
know.
they feel about Loki and the Jotnar and Loki's kin? You know, if they won't say Loki's name and they call him something like Goat's Tether
Mhm.
and will not say his name, that's another red flag. At least they're definitely not Loki friendly. And there are heathens I respect who over the years have changed their opinion of Loki. In the Troth, the international heathen organization I belong to, for a long time there was a official ban. You were not allowed to hail Loki in the Grand Ensemble
Hmm.
or any of the Troth sponsored gatherings.
Oh wow.
And I mostly followed that when I was in the Troth, just on the interests of because I was interested in people who are new to heathenry. I wouldn't necessarily say start with Loki and unless that's who brings you. You know, dance with the god what brung you. And sometimes gods will introduce you to other gods. So sometimes
Totally.
they hand you off, and there are sometimes alliances, and I don't know all that stuff, but I get the definite feeling that's what's going on.
So I'm curious. So I heard you say that you were part of the Troth. Am I saying that right?
Yeah.
You were part of the Troth for a long time, and you chose to stay there even though they had an active ban on invoking or just saying the name Loki, which is to whom you are devoted.
Yeah.
Is that a fair
I don't know about well, I honor Loki.
honor? Why did you choose to stay at a place that did not honor your
It's a good
deity?
question. For one thing, I guess I'm a little optimistic in that, like
Like,
LGTB, that I was seeing the attitude change in the Troth toward that as well.
mhm.
That over time things would change, and so I was kind of viewing myself not consciously, but as sort of a pioneer. It's like being female and being
Mhm.
heathen. If you go into the people back when it started as a modern movement in the 60s, it was all about swords and spears and hands of tyr and hunting boars with the spear.
Oh, there are people that actually went out hunting boars?
Yes.
Holy wow.
Yes.
Okay.
With arrows.
Whoa. Like
these were hardcore heathens, man.
like the mechanic, like the
Crossbows? No.
like not, but like
Yeah.
where you fully, or
Yeah.
the mechanical ones that you get these days that are like, is that
No,
really a
no,
bow
no,
and
no.
arrow?
With a string, a bow with a string. I'm sure they were compound bows, but you know, yeah, there
Okay.
you get that whole spectrum. You
Okay.
know, and then you get like, you know, city dwelling me who lives in an apartment in Chicago, and you know, has to look for my places to have fun outdoors, and
Mhm.
where to lift a horn where it's not illegal to drink alcohol in public, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
You know, but yeah, I stayed in the troth for that reason. There were several Lokians in the troth. In fact, my mentor into heathenry was openly Lokian, and also on the High Reed, which is the governing body of the troth.
Mm.
And she was a loud proponent of Loki, and so I learned to be before I quite realized the cost. I remember saying to Richie, you know, my husband thinks he's the chosen one of Loki, and Richie wouldn't talk to us. So, you know, that's not the ideal way to introduce yourself at a heathen gathering. Hail Loki is I
Still
mean,
not quite.
unless you're really up for something, and
Mhm.
you know, because of the concept of frith, which is active peacemaking. It's not just getting along. A lot of heathens interpret it to mean as getting along, not starting a fight. But frith is actually a process of creating peace and getting people to make connections and grow together. And so to keep the frith was mostly
Mhm.
why I would voluntarily not do Loki stuff in troth spaces.
Mm.
However, there were some unofficial Loki bloats at Troth Moon that I happily
Ooh.
participated in. Well, anyway, after all these
Love that.
years of the band,
Uh-huh.
there some people who were in the Reed, things had gotten a bit more liberal, and they looked back and said, "What is the origin of this ban?" And
Mhm.
it was thought that it had been voted upon by the Reed, but it turns out they couldn't find in the notes
Any
that they
vote?
did. It was just discussion. They had a new what do you call it, mission statement,
Mhm.
and so they updated it. And they originally there was stuff like you can't honor Loki or the children of Loki or antithetical deities. And Carolyn was on the Reed, and she made a big fuss about it. And I was brand new, and I made a big fuss about it. And
Mhm.
I was also the Illinois Stewart when Carolyn took on the High Reed role. So I would, you know, do public heathen rituals, which is in and of itself is a bit idiosyncratic, because there's a really sharp learning curve to heathenry, and and because reputation is everything, it can be easy to offend without meaning to at first,
That's
like
fair.
saying you're Lokian.
That's fair. I remember my first entrance into heathenry was um, Richie, and I think we were were we talking
Yeah,
about
Richie
the
Williams.
same Richie? Okay, I was like, I'm not sure if it was the same one or a different Richie. So Richie and I were roommates, and so he's a Satru, and would have all of the things, and we had a shared temple
I remember
room,
that.
and so at one point I'm like, "What are all of these things?" And he's telling me, and then in the circle that Phyllis and I met in, part of how it worked was every month different people would lead ritual, and with from their own personal tradition, with some tweaking by the high priest and priestess of the circle, and there were mixed feelings about how much tweaking happened. um, and Richie, one day, for 1 month, was doing a full bloat, and he asked me if I would, help out with some of the things and some of the invocations, and it was so different, but still, like, I can still remember the sensation of holding whatever skull it was in my hands. Yeah, I don't remember what I was saying. I don't remember whom I was invoking at the time, and that's probably wise for this particular conversation and such. Um, but I remember the sensations, and I remember appreciating how it was part of the reason why I came to paganism was the love of the natural world and the natural cycles and wanting to be in harmony with this good earth, our only home. And I felt I felt that connection through that skull, whatever cat skull, animal skull. It was an animal skull of some sort. Um, and I also remember that Richie and I had this conversation beforehand because he was like, I don't know if you want to do this because you're a vegetarian and it's going to mean that you're holding dead animal bones. And I'm like, you are using all of the things and doing so with love and reverence. So I didn't have to eat anything. We're good. Um, and yeah, like I understand in that small way of like what you're talking about with with a steep learning curve. And I were you doing were with the rituals that you were facilitating, were they outdoors or were they indoors?
I like to do them outside, but there's actually some sects of heathenry who insist rituals must be done under a roof tree, which is
Mm.
to say the beams of a house, because of the feelings of hospitality and kind of, I guess, almost sacred space.
Mhm.
But I like to do stuff outside, and just as long as you got people and a horn and you want to do something, you've got a bloat.
Mhm.
And it doesn't have to be filled with alcohol. It could be just as great filled with water.
Mhm.
Because one of the things I did when I did a lot of rituals is I went to using not non-alcoholic libations. Because like one time I was in
Mhm.
doing a circle, and it was with people who weren't familiar with heathenry,
Mhm.
and like we had a pregnant woman, we had somebody who had just had a transplant, and so they didn't want to mess up their new organs.
Mhm.
We had people who were in recovery, and we had people who just didn't feel like drinking alcohol,
Mhm.
or they had a cold,
Mhm.
and that's when I realized, oh my gosh, this is another aspect of heathenry that needs some focus, is dealing with alcohol, since it is often used in ritual and people feel it's important. um that's another challenge that
Mhm.
heathenry faces. It's starting to address. But to go back to the thing with the Loki man,
Yes.
after they realized that there had been no official decision to ban Loki, they said, we owe Loki a debt. And so for
Mm.
the next 10 years, there is going to be a Loki bloated troth move. And that started,
Nice.
was it 2 or 3 years? It was right before,
Uh-huh.
it was before COVID.
Okay.
And they had Loki moot, where it was all about Loki. I mean, it was still a heathen gathering, but like there was Loki channeling, and we had the big Loki bloat, and people came to this bloat who were staunch. I don't want to deal with Loki because of all the drama,
Uh-huh.
and for a lot of people that was it. But there's also a belief in heathenry, like when you stand in circle and you lift a horn with people and you mingle all of your thoughts together, it echoes in the well of weird. And
Mhm.
so you don't want to like lie or say mean things or whatever. But also, everybody in the circle shares the luck from that ritual, good or bad.
Mm.
So there are a lot of people who are kind of worried about, I guess, Loki pollution. And like I
Okay.
said, I've known heathens we got along great and we agreed on pretty much everything except this Loki
Except
issue.
Loki.
And so for some, I've, reserved, okay, I respect, your position, and you're not trying to stop me from doing my thing. So we're good. And there are other people who are just like, oh, they're anti-Loki and I'm not even talking to them, you
Mm.
know, just because I don't feel like going there.
Yeah.
Um,
One of the
so,
things that I learned about Loki in reading your introduction, and full disclosure, I haven't read the full book, uh, Blood Unbound, a Loki devotional, yet, but I had no idea that Loki was such a shape and gender switch.
oh, yeah,
And I love that.
that's,
And
that's part of his draw for some people.
I love that. And one of the so I'm also finishing up reading the Mahabharata, and one of the main characters there also lives a huge chunk of his life as a woman. And so I love when more things of our ancient histories and ethnobiographies come up with like, no, all of the gender fluidity has been around for a long time. It's not actually anything new.
That's not at all. Yeah, nothing new under the sun for sure.
Nothing new under the sun.
Yeah. I'd say actually a large percentage of Lokians were drawn because of the gender fluidity and that aspect, because they didn't feel like anybody else. Loki is also a god of broken and bruised and battered human beings. A lot of people who suffered abuse feel drawn to Loki because there's this reputation he's, dangerous and tricksterish and all that, but to his people, he is loving and kind and protective. And one of the things that a lot of people don't know about Loki is he's fond of children. One of the ways you can worship Loki easily is to give children a bunch of toys and just watch the chaos. That's a Loki blow. And so when somebody comes to me and says something like, "Oh, you don't trust Loki," blah blah blah, and they say anything about him being uncool towards children, or no, no, that's like, okay, you don't know what you're talking about. I'm on my way. Unless they seem like they're ignorant and just need some adjustments.
Like they heard one thing from one person.
Well, it's kind of like
it
the Norse
took root.
Satan to some people.
Yeah.
So, father of lies, and that's not actually what that sobriquet means.
What does that? What's the
I forget the
Icelandic
actual
word?
I think it's in Old Norse, and
Old
I
Norse.
don't remember the phrase, but it's interpreted as father of lies, but it actually comes out to something like sweet-tongued speaker. So, tricky with words, but not necessarily lies. In fact, in my experience, one of the best ways to lie is to tell the truth. If you're going to do it.
Yeah. And a lot of times people just don't want to hear that truth.
No. And that's the problem. If you look at all the stories about Loki, he's often the guy saying, "Hey, we don't have walls around Asgard. Maybe we should do something about that."
Right? So when so with that, when you took the time to scroll through Odin and the Nine Realms Oracle deck, which I'll show some of these cards here for y'all. Where does this fall for you? Because some of I recognize the runes, but a lot of the people like Vili and Ve, I do not know who they are within the Norse pantheon. Where does this fall for you in terms of use, spelling, accessibility? Like, well, I guess in some ways I should speak to the accessibility part because I am not a heathen, and I am finding it to be keen and a little on the nose. Last night I did a little test because we were going live in a different place. Oh, and Dana Pearl is on and says,
Hey,
"Hello, Phil. Hi, Dana." Yes, friends, if you have questions, please pop them in the chat. One of the nice things about going live directly on the YouTubes is that I can actually see the chat here really easily. Yay! But the card that popped out last night after blind shuffling was Loki, and I'm like, oh, excellent! Like I am so glad, friend, that you are smiling upon our conversation. But I haven't gotten a chance to really dive into it otherwise. Although um, the writing seems straightforward. The book, it's in black and white, but well done. I had a little confusion with Merkstav. Am I saying that
Merc
correct?
stave.
Merkstave, because I was like, I guess that's reversed, but I don't
Yeah.
ever think about runes as being reversed.
Well,
So
see,
that was
if
a
you
little
actually look
strange.
at them, some of them you can turn them every way and they look the same, and
Hmm.
others they look different. Some of you flip them right to left, they look different. So I never really got into the reverse meanings for runes.
Well, and also because like with the you can't do the left right with the card. So well, but I don't know. I don't know. The feeling of reversals and runes just
I think it's an import
is
from
different.
tarot reading. People who read the cards, they want a positive and a negative, and if you think about it, you can come up with reverse meanings that should mean, you know, if you because the way I believe Dare of the Nation works is you come up with these symbols you use, and your brain, however your brain works to get the knowledge to you, clues into the symbols you use. So you can use anything.
Mhm.
And as long as you have a pretty good knowledge of what you think it's going to mean, you'll get the right answer in my experience.
I completely agree with that. And one of the other ways that this deck seems to um, tie into tarot a little more than runes in some way. Rune spreads is what you were talking about with the different spreads of how it has a Celtic cross in here and um, it has some other spreads. The Nine Realms spread. So what are the Nine Realms?
Oh, I'm gonna have to look at your cards to read them all off because they're here. Let's see. Let's go through them. Let's see if I can do them without massacring them. Here we go. There's Asgard, which is where Odin hangs out.
Hmm.
Midgard, Vanaheim, Jotunheim, Niflheim, Muspelheim. How'd she write it? Muspelsheimer, Elfheimer, Hell, and Hell. So those are they. And usually they're like the light elves live in Alfheim, and Hell, the goddess Hell, rules the realm of Hell, which is where a lot of people, most people go. It's not a place of suffering. There are parts of Hell that have to do with suffering, but that's not the whole main thing. It's more kind of like where everybody just ends up, and Hell is a huge realm in my very limited astral experience.
And hell is spelled Hel with
Yeah.
just one L, if I remember correctly. So, do we have all of the realms in card
Either we should.
form?
It'd be a bad oracle if there weren't 9 realms.
so, so then, in looking at these, because there is a mix of rune cards and people. The Valkyries are ones that I know. Places, the Yggdrasil um, uh, life tree. Um, so it seems almost like you could really get, like, for those who are familiar with the different Eddas in the North mythology, it sounds like you could really get a good story of story from these cards in terms of what you pull.
Oh yeah, I would say so. I mean, I'm used to using the runes, and that's only 24, and a lot of people get along just fine with that.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, having read the foreword and the afterword to this book, this person has studied heathenry and gives accurate understandings of the basics of this is the realm of mist, and this is the realm where hell lives, and Thor generally means this, and whereas they seem to have done a lot of astral traveling to get this knowledge,
Hmm.
but it's also based on the lore. And so I didn't find much to object to in the descriptions of the runes or the realms or the gods, but there were some just, oh well, you use the Valkyries as a card. Well, there's a lot of Valkyries. Why not pick one? you know
Mm.
and
Probably for people like me who would be like, Who is this?" But when I'm told Valkyries, I'm like, "Oh, the flying ladies."
and some of the runes, they
I'm
just
sorry. I know there's more to you. I know there's more to you than flying ladies and warriors. I just haven't done that research yet.
well, you got to dig for it.
For people who want to dig, the two sources that I am familiar with are the Poetic Edda and the Prose Edda. What are other resources?
Well, there's a
Or
lot
are
of
those
resources. They're not like the Bible. They're collection of poems that were from the time before Vikings wrote stuff down, so from the oral tradition, and were written down by Christian monks in the 11th through 13th centuries.
Mhm.
And skaldic poetry using mythological themes lasted till much later. So there's the Prose Edda and the Poetic Edda, which were attempts to sort of gather the knowledge into a book to kind of explain things. And as a result, the person putting the stuff together, Snorri Sturluson, probably had to say, well, this makes sense, so we'll put it here, and this makes sense here. And so the order the stories happen in aren't necessarily the historical, mythological order that they may have necessarily happened. So, and that can, because we come from a culture where we're very lore oriented, what with the Bible and all, and going line by line and word by word, people sometimes draw conclusions that aren't necessarily warranted from these sources. Because the poetry, for one thing, the Poetic Edda is poetry, and it's Norse poetry, so it doesn't rhyme. They're more into alliteration and a lot of kennings, which are a way of talking about something without actually saying it. So you want to say a tree, or you want to say a warrior, and you call them battle trees. And for example, there's a story about Loki where, well, spoiler alert, he ties goat to his balls to make a goddess laugh.
I mean, that would make me laugh.
Right. So some people, like a kenning for Loki could be goat's tether. It's a very disrespectful kenning, but what it's accurate. Gosh, where was I going with this?
I bet all's well.
The kennings. Because the poetry focused on things like that, there's often a lot more depth to the poem than you would necessarily know. And because this was, it was poetry and songs and stories, it wasn't an effort to lay out liturgy.
A timeline.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, you just have a bunch of stories. So as far as the ritual goes, a lot of the ritual is reconstruction. Some of it from historical sources, like the Saga of Eric the Red gives a description of the vulva and her magical way of doing things, which is called scythe work or sade.
Is that where we get our lovely word, the vulva?
Yes.
Yes, I love that. That just makes me.
And don't ask me for
sit a little more powerfully.
Actually, I'm not sure, but as far as I'm concerned, it does.
I love that. I mean,
the witches were generally female, and the knowledge was passed through females. But anyway, that saga gives an outline of what happened, and so modern recreations that I've seen that work use that format. But a lot of the stuff came from Wicca, because as a modern movement, with neo-paganism is older, and I'm sure a lot of ceremonial magic. Yeah,
I did not realize that.
Oh yeah, because Wicca and all that really dates back to the roots of it back to the 40s and 50s. They got the witches in the New Forest. It wasn't quite Wiccan, but British traditional witchcraft.
Oh,
and doing rituals against Hitler in England. So whereas I'm sure there were occultists, because there were Nazi occultists who used the runes, but the modern recreation of neo-paganry that we call heathenism is fairly new, and so a lot of rituals were borrowed. Ceremonial magic, there are a lot of rune workers who do a very ceremonial magic kind of thing.
Fascinating.
The first book I picked up as a pagan, back before I called myself heathen, was The Greater Key of Solomon, which is like hardcore.
Yeah.
And so I look at that, and so I see that in some of the ritual.
So that's a perfect segue of circling back to where this started, of what are other good resources
Oh, right.
for folk who are interested in heathenry,
Well,
and
there's some great
especially in
modern
inclusive
books. There's some
heathenry?
great modern books. Essential Asatru by Patricia Falvo is a good one that gives you the basics and is, I would call, a very middle of the road interpretation of heathenry with some more affection for the lore.
Mhm.
You know, there's something in well, paganism too, called UPG, unusual personal gnosis.
Mhm.
It's where you have a vision, and you in your vision, Freya, you offer strawberries, and Freya's all in favor. Well, a lot of Freya's women will tell you that Freya does indeed like strawberries.
Hmm.
So it's unverified personal gnosis when you just think it. It's
Uh-huh.
verified personal gnosis when a bunch of other people tend to agree.
Fascinating, because one of the things that I almost put out just so that we had snacks was strawberries. They are right in my kitchen. In fact, they are still on the counter. I did not put them back in the fridge.
There are also I mean, once you want to get more into it, there are other individual sagas, like Njal's saga is a really good one for beginners because it kind of gets into the whole feuding thing. You got to remember in the actual sagas, they're all about battles and
Mhm.
kings and that sort of thing. They're it's like Western history. It's all the doings of men and kings and battles. But there's other stuff in there that makes them worth studying. There's another one called oh, bloody hell, I'm forgetting it. It's by Saxo Grammaticus.
Would it be
It might be in the footnotes. No,
in the footnote?
no,
Is
no.
there like a
No,
good?
everybody did their individual
Gotcha. Did you talk about it
bibliographies.
in your intro?
Oh no, let's see. Oh, additional sources. No, damn it. Oh wait. Ah, yes, Saxo Grammaticus, the Gesta Danorum. It's in Latin rather than
Hmm.
Norwegian, and Saxo is hard to read, especially if you're a woman, because he's one of the few sources that talks about female warriors in battle and gives examples.
Hmm.
But he always marries them off after they've won their battles, and they end up being queens and mothers, and they don't do anything fun anymore. And it's almost like there's a lesson to be learned. Don't be one of these uppity women. And Saxo,
Mm.
again, was a monk, and he was a
Mhm.
bit later than Snorri. Um, but I would say Essential Asatru is a really good start. If you go onto the Troth website, they have other listings of good additional sources, um, and also material there. I highly recommend joining the Troth if you're new to heathenry, just for the resources alone, because there's like a quarterly magazine that they put out that is full of articles by other heathens.
Mm.
And again, supporting the Troth because they're an inclusive organization is always good.
Love that. And I will work with Phyllis over the next few days to make sure that all of the links to the Troth and all of these books get added into the comment section. Just please be a little gracious with the timelines, because life is full at the moment. And I'm going to take this to the camera pause break to read the comments. Uh Yes. So Dana Pearl is saying that wore a pendant with uh, Bjork, Bjork. I don't know if
Bjork.
Bjork
Yeah.
on it early in my business. It helped me get clients. So who is Bjork?
She's got a few names. I've also
Let's see.
called her called Birkana.
Uh-huh.
She's symbolized by the birch tree, and she is one of the earth goddesses we don't know a whole lot about. So
Oh.
there's more in one of the other sources for Norse stuff is
Hmm.
folklore. But of course, that comes down through a long chain, including a long Christian occupations. So you got to take that with a grain of salt.
Totally.
But I would say, very aligned with birth and growing things and fertility. Pretty much the sort of thing you think of an earth mother as being.
Nice. A Scandinavian Danu sort of thing.
Yeah.
I'm scrolling through to see if she is represented
I don't think
in
so.
Odin in the Nine Realms, and I am not seeing her here, although I
Well,
am gonna.
that would be over 24 extra cards because the either in the Prose Edda, uh, one the writer says, there's 12 gods and 12 goddesses, and the goddesses are equally as powerful as the gods, and then he goes on to list 37.
That math does not add up.
And he doesn't list Loki as one of the gods in
Hmm.
the 12 gods, which is where a lot of the anti-Lokians see he's not actually even a god,
Oh,
but he's a god.
interesting.
Yeah, and again, it comes down to being fundamentalist with the text. Like there's another part that says, you know, of all the slain in battle, Odin gets half, and Freya gets half, or Freya gets half, and Odin gets half, and so everyone assumes Freya gets first dibs.
Hmm.
But that's just it comes first in the sentence. I don't think when they wrote this down, people were
Mm,
thinking, "Oh, we're going to plan a liturgy based on this information."
gotcha. That like, or that they even necessarily had the same importance of sentence
Or
structure.
in the same. See, the other thing is the Viking Age was a long time. It was
Yeah.
over a big geographical area, and a lot of beliefs were local. So, like, there's Nehelenia. She is a deity from Holland,
Hmm.
and she's mentioned once or twice, but they found wagons dedicated to her that were sacrificed in bogs. So we know she had, at least in Holland, she was
Hmm.
somebody, but we don't know a lot about her. And
Mm.
like in one of the Roman sources, they mentioned that there were these three goddesses of the Rhines, and they called them the Matronae, the
Hmm.
mothers.
Hmm. Oh, I do think that one is one of the ones in here.
Well, that might be the Norns you're thinking about.
Oh, that might be.
See,
That
and that's
might
the
be.
other thing. There's three Norns. If you're having a oracle deck, use all three. Don't just say the Norns. That's just my little beef. The other thing I noticed when I was reading the book is whereas the basic description of the place or the person resonates with what I know, when they go into more detail about what does the god actually mean or what does the rune actually mean, they keep the same sense of what I'd agree with, but they use different imagery. So if you want to go with traditional
Mm.
imagery, this isn't the best deck. I mean,
Mm.
they portray the runes as what I would call standard in a standard form, but oh, there were some of them I was looking at, and I was like, oh, what was it? Oh, oh, here we go. Not here. Need
Mhm.
fire. What it's supposed, I believe it's depicting is somebody rubbing two sticks together to make a fire, and it's you make a fire when you really really need the fire. It's your first fire in the house. And I think you could have done more than just you know Celtic knotworky looking things. I think you could have used an image that would portray that meaning a little better.
Mm.
But I'm not the artist.
So this is the Norns card that was referenced earlier. So, who are the three Norns?
Erd, Verdandi, and Skull.
Earth, Vertandi, and Skull. And so I take it that each of the Norns has a very
Yeah, it's very much
specific
it's
role.
similar to the fates.
Hmm.
The past, present, and future. They don't actually mean past, present, and future. It actually means something like becoming, and I don't even know how to describe it, but it's the same idea.
Gotcha.
It's not quite. They weave they weave the weft of weird when they
Mm.
sort of weave our fates in a big loom is how they're represented. So that same imagery of cutting cords and cords being interwoven, it does resonate very similar to the fates.
So one of the things that I am noticing in some of these cards, but not all of them, is that up in the corners there is a little, what I would call an elemental wheel. It's very similar to many of the different indigenous tribes of North America's medicine wheel, but it is the colors that I associate with the um, elements of yellow, blue, green, and red, air, water, earth, fire. Is does that have do you agree, disagree, think something different, think it might just be artistic license?
I think it's just an import from neo-paganism,
Mm.
that same elemental correspondence. I don't think it's particular. There are rituals that heathens do that call the quarters,
Hmm.
and those ones are obviously based on Wiccan ritual structure. And I don't find that the colors necessarily correspond in the Norse tradition, but it's not something I work with heavily. But red is very much associated with runes, and it's
Hmm.
thought that they were reddened with blood,
Hmm.
hence the connection.
Hmm.
So red
Hmm.
would have a disproportionate power, I think, if you were to go with a color cosmology.
Gotcha. And um,
And the colors are different. They didn't
hmm,
have a word for orange in Old Norse, so
hmm,
everybody with ginger hair is called red. And there's
hmm.
many shades of red.
Many shades of red. I don't know. I don't know if my hair looks red in this light and camera or not, but sometimes it doesn't. Like sometimes it doesn't. And there's the reds and the gingers and the strawberries and the really deep auburns and like
Yeah.
so many lovely shades. So is there? And this is something that I feel like I asked a long time ago, and I don't remember the answer. Is there a connection between doing bloat and blood? Because
Yeah.
the words seem very similar, but that could just also be
I
my
believe the
ear.
word that they're translating for it, the etymology of the word blood is thought to go back to hlot, which means blood.
Hmm.
And if you go to a well, if you go to a bloat, there usually be a bowl of an offering, and you'll be sprinkled with it.
Mhm.
And it's thought that would have been blood after a sacrifice, because in the old days when you were having a big gathering of people, you'd go and you'd kill the cow or the pig or whatever for everybody. Well, why would that not be part of a sacrifice? And
Mm.
we know that there were sacrifices, and some of the modern heathens have done like a pig bloat. They kill the pig, and then it's like
Mhm.
a big holy barbecue where you cook it
Mhm.
up for all the participants.
Mhm.
Well, then you use the blood ritually at the beginning to bless everybody,
Mhm.
which probably wouldn't be your cup of tea being splat. But now we
Yeah.
use mead, so it's a lot more friendly, or water, whatever's in the bowl.
Whatever's in the bowl. Um, the rune that looks like a pointy bee.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's
Yeah,
Bjork.
Bjork. So coming around to um, finding groups, warning signs. For me as a vegetarian, I would not necessarily want to be an active participant in a circle that was doing the sacrifices
That's
that you
not
were
common,
talking
by the
about.
way. That's
No,
not
that's
common.
well, but also like I'm a vegetarian for a myriad of reasons, but there's a if people are going to one of my own personal beliefs is I eat what I am willing to kill. I am willing to kill carrots and I am willing to kill soybeans and grapefruits and beans and I am willing and I love that I don't have to kill any chickens to get my eggs and that I can just milk the animals, although I've done milking once in my life, the for milk and cheese and things like that. But I have great respect if you are going to eat something that you are willing to kill it and know how to butcher it and to use all of the things
Well,
so
it's
that
also
it is a
more
good harvest.
mindful. You're
Completely more
using
mindful.
you're recycling the life energy too, in a
Exactly.
way.
Exactly. That all of it is being used. And so for me, if I was looking for and what is a circle of heathens called? Like if I was looking for a circle, if I was looking for
I guess group is the
a
best
group,
word, because they're kindreds, but kindreds aren't usually open.
gotcha.
They're kind of like a coven idea, where it's
Mhm.
a closed group, and you don't just let anybody in. And you might have a thing where you invite some people in, just
Mhm.
like guests, but the really heavy duty stuff is
Mhm.
just that group. And also, you can be a heathen without doing any magic. So that's not necessarily the circle is usually more a
Mhm.
religious observance than a magical working most
Mhm.
of the time.
Hmm.
So,
How do you define the difference between those? I love that.
oh, well, to me, if the point is to honor a deity, then that's more worship.
Mhm,
Even if, there's some mechanics in there, like if you make an oath during
mhm,
a symbol or a bloat,
mhm,
um, that's, I guess, sort of a magical working, but it does, you're just saying what you're going to do. You're not incanting, you're not pulling,
mhm,
Other people view it differently. I tend to have almost a atheistic heathen point of view in some
mm,
ways, but yeah, to me, if you start ritualizing it, where there's beginning, middle, and end, and there's an ultimate goal to affect the world, that's more what magic is.
mm,
And
mhm,
I guess you're affecting the world when in a bloat or a symbol. And of course, you can do a bloat or a symbol to affect the world. They're just not as common in my experience. Um, but to me, that's worship rather than religion,
mm,
and that might be a good thing to know when you're going into it. Because, like I said, you're generally not. There is a rite called the hammer rite, which is basically calling the quarters, except you add the top and the bottom,
mhm.
and usually I've seen it done by a European heathen who just screamed in each direction, and that worked for them.
There was something similar to that at, Beltane Southwest. Beltane was it Beltane Southwest, or was it Mystic Maybon? Oh, now I can't remember. Hopefully some of the fantastic heathens from that, community can watch this and weigh in, but there is something very similar of, like, and like, "Great! Hi! Hi!"
It got things going.
It did. It did. There was energy and voice, and when you're dealing with a large group of a few hundred outdoors, like,
Oh,
have that projection.
I can think of a large public ritual that heathens do
Mm,
occasionally. And when I say public, it's for given value of public. It's like you're at a troth moot, and there's 100 people there. These
mhm,
are not all your kindred, but you're doing kindredy things with them.
mhm,
Um, it's the safe working, where it's an oracle where someone goes and they sit in the high
mm,
seat, and they either, depending on the person and how their magic works, they either journey astrally to go get information, or they call someone to come to them and
mhm,
give them information,
mhm,
or they actually horse the deity, which
mhm,
frankly isn't my cup of tea, but a lot of people do it and it works for them. I
mhm.
tend to like to talk,
That's
and I don't travel easily either, but I've actually sat in the high seat myself.
fair. Mm,
But generally, everybody gets together and they sort of sing a song and do a chant to get the person on the high seat in the mood.
mhm,
And then the person on the chair goes up on the chair, and when they're ready, they make their indication. And then someone comes up and asks their question,
mm,
and they get a response. And
mhm,
usually, the circle is small enough that everybody in the circle can pretty much hear what you're saying.
mhm,
So you hear some rather intense stories, and it's like talk about what you
mhm.
hear.
Of course.
Um,
What's said here stays here, what's
right.
learned here leaves.
But
Mhm.
that can be a big ritual. I've seen like hundreds of people involved in it, and in that
Mm,
case, you actually have sort of team people. Yeah, they tag team up and go sit on the chair and for a while, and
mhm.
then sometimes it'll be, I understand your question, but I'm not the one to answer it. Ask it again when so and so gets on the chair.
Mm, mhm, mhm.
And that's a working where usually the people in the high seat are women, but in a way, in modern heathenry's changed, is much more welcoming of men sitting in the high seat. And some of the people who first were to do this were gay,
Mm,
and associated that ability with being gay.
mm,
But I don't think it's personally necessary. It's a personal thing.
mhm. Hello, Cheryl. Thank
Oh,
you.
good. Hi,
Thank you.
guys.
Thank you for popping. It's a Chicago Circle mini reunion here. So I want to check in on the time. Oh my gosh, we're like perfectly at time.
Do we have time for questions, or are we done?
We totally have time for questions. Any questions, friends? And while we give that a moment, because there is a lag in these things.
Oh, yeah, there's the one in the book.
Yes, but the one in the book is Loki.
Okay.
And so, like, I feel like Loki is just all here and all apart. So something helpful for this week. So, Iwar? Is that how that
It
is?
was. I'd say it was. Just I learned different names.
So it was. So as something helpful for this week, how would you interpret this?
I'm gonna look at my book.
I love
I have
that.
my own book,
I love
which
that.
gives me the old English and Old Norse rune poems to go along with it.
Yes. And
So
then we can do
we can check it.
a comparison while we wait for questions in the chat.
That's the spinny one. Here we go. The U or Yggdrasil is what some people think this represents because
Mm.
the poem goes, "U is on the outside, a rough tree and hard, firm in the earth, keeper of the fire, supported by roots, a joy on the estate." And then another rune poem says it's a strong bow. And U is a strong bow and brittle and brittle. And Farbauti, a giant of the arrow. And Farbauti is actually Loki's father.
Hmm.
So Farbauti is not a friendly energy.
Hmm.
He's thought to be like lightning. Cruel striker is one of his kennings.
Oh my.
Yeah. So to me, this would say a need for protection. Be careful. Now, what do they say?
All right. So Sonia Grace writes, Ishwar, axis, life, death, yew tree. Ihwar,
Ishwar,
Ishwaz
yeah.
represents the vertical axis or the central line of Yggdrasil, the tree of life, the yew tree. In Old Norse mythology, there are many references to the yew tree, and it is no accident that the Norse used the wood of the yew to make their bows and arrows. This powerful rune is an example of the cosmic nature of these symbols bestowed on Odin. In a more earth based understanding, this card offers a powerful connection that protects and helps to connect with your core energy. The vibration at the center of the tree of life flows to all 9 realms and is a conduit for the divine. If you draw this card, it is time to appreciate the mysteries of life. Remember, there is joy and happiness when a soul enters the world as a newborn, and at the same time, there's a fantastic journey when we depart the planet in death. Like the axis of Yggdrasil, Ihvar's. I feel like I'm saying that name differently every time. Ihwaz. Contains the mystery of life and death and shows us the core from which the gods came. This rune is a blessing, urging you to reconnect with your core and align with the source. There is no Merkstav or reverse position to Ihwaz, just a reminder that through inconvenience and discomfort, we experience growth. Even through trying times, stay in your center, meditate, asking for the will of God to align you.
That's a little bit different than protection.
It is,
but they were still sticking with the whole Yggdrasil is the axis, what is it? Axis Mundi.
Mm-hmm. And hearing that and just looking, because I tend to like look and embody things, that central axis of staying um, centered to core values and allowing arms to come out, like whether that is in protection and stay away, do not knock me off of my center, or like I feel like there is marriage and work in both there. And so I love that the question poses, when are the 2 of us coming to Chicago? I do not have, oh, so I was about to say I don't have a Chicago visit on the books, and that is true. But my mom and I are talking about doing a road trip um, to take my dad's ashes a bunch of places this year, and for my mom to spend some time with her oldest sister and my cousin, and they're in Michigan. So
Kind of on the way.
so it's kind of on the way, depending on how I get there. Um, I will, however, that is also a good chance to plug, and then make sure that you plug. I will be presenting the Tarot show at Convocation, which is one of the oldest which is now the oldest pagan gathering in the U.S. In February. So I will be close to Chicago when I am presenting there because it is right outside of Detroit. So I will not be in Chicago, but I will be very, very close to Detroit, and I will see if I can bring Phyllis along with me, Dana. We will see if that happens. And what about you? When are you going to be going to
I don't.
Chicago next? And what is there anything that you would like to plug?
Well, see, when I'll be in Chicago, probably when my nibblings graduate high school, which is going to be in about 4 years.
Oh, they just
But
started.
you never know. Stuff might happen, and I might go back sooner. But I like it out here.
Me too.
I'm very happy in my Pacific Northwest home. I've only been here about 7 years, but I'm still much enjoying it. I don't really have anything to plug.
Okay.
Just I do know something I can plug, not for me, but if you're trying to find groups that are inclusive, there are two things you can look for that are decent indicators. One of them is, and I'll give the links to you for this.
Thank you.
One of them is Declaration 127, which is based on a stanza in the Havamal, which basically says, when you see injustice, fight it, and those people are your enemies, and give them no peace. So it's a very active, not just don't let things slide, but no, don't let this even come close to passing. But and so people sign on to it. I think as a kindred or as an individual. If you find if you ask, you go up to them and you say, "Are you a signatory to Declaration 127?" Or there's another one called the Declaration of Deeds, which is much more in depth. I don't want to quote it because it's like a paragraph or two long, well, more than a couple paragraphs. But if they say, "No, I didn't sign Declaration 127. I didn't think it went far enough. I signed the Declaration of Deeds." That's an even better indication. So those are things to look for. And also, if you join the Troth and you ask what's a good kindred, you're generally going to get a more inclusive kindred. I mean, things happen, but if you're in the Troth, you pretty much said, "Okay, I'm kind of liberal."
I love that. Well, Phyllis, thank you so much.
It was great to be here.
And thank you all for joining or listening in. I go live the 10th of the month at 11 o'clock Pacific. Next month, I will be chatting with Lisa Robertson, creator of Cirque de Tarot. And you can find me presenting at StarCon and Open Channel and at Convocation doing the Tarot show. And we will see you all next month. And oh, Cheryl, thank you. That's super sweet. Have a beautiful rest of your day, friends.